Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Javon Harrington, back to hit you with another video. And today, we're going to be starting the second half of a rather popular series that we started a few months ago. That being, What If Naruto Was Trained by Dr. Strange? Naruto Mystic Adventures Shippuden Part 0. Now you might be wondering, why is this called Part 0? Well, you could say this is a bit of a prologue, if you will, before we get into the full dive in of the story itself. And the reason for this prologue is that since we are doing the Shippuden part of a Naruto What If, there has been a training arc. And I've decided that for this video, I want to briefly go over the powers and everything else that were used and that are going to be used in this series so far, just to give you an idea and understanding of where everyone's going to be at going forward. Now, granted, I could have probably have just added this to the first part in general, but I think that would have been a little too much, and there's already going to be more than enough story in the prologue to get started. So I figured we can just hold off on that for now, and I really do want to get a deep dive on the powers and everything else that you're going to be seeing in the story, because there's honestly a lot to get into. Also, if you haven't, please check out the first half of the series if you haven't seen it already, so that you'll understand everything that's going on. I will give a brief recap right now of everything leading up to the second half of this story, just in case, but it would do you good to hear the story from the beginning so that you'll understand everything going forward. So anyway, with this story, we actually begin 2 years before the start of part 1 of Naruto. Naruto would be out in a forest all alone when he is suddenly attacked by one of the Mindless Ones, a mindless demonic creature from the Doctor Strange franchise. Now we would have Doctor Strange, this will be from the MCU version, arrive in the Naruto world to defeat the stray demon, and in the process, he ends up meeting with Naruto and learning of his backstory. Now this version of Doctor Strange would have been coming off the events of the first Doctor Strange movie, but it would have been 3 years before the events of Avengers Infinity War. So because Doctor Strange meets Naruto and he learns about his situation and what he's going through, he decides to take time to train Naruto, basically popping in and out of Naruto's dimension every now and again, picking him up for a few weeks or maybe a month or two at a time to train him up in the ways of the mystic arts. Because of this, it has a profound effect on Naruto. Naruto getting a bit of a father figure that he never really had growing up, and Strange kind of seeing Naruto as a bit of his own surrogate kind of son. Now, because of this, Naruto develops, even if by a little, into a much more well-rounded character. In doing so, by learning things like meditation and learning to better control his usage of magic, it ends up helping him a lot more with his chakra control as well. Due to his training with Doctor Strange and Wong, Naruto actually ends up learning a lot earlier that he is the Nine-Tailed Fox's Jinchuriki, and he's actually able to handle it and deal with it since he has people who would be there to support him in the process. So essentially, Naruto becomes a much more well-rounded student going into the 2 years before the events of the Naruto series. Some things play out relatively the same. Naruto isn't the dead last of his class, he's actually more in the middle of the pack. It's not that he's a bookworm necessarily, he's not going to have the highest grades, but his ninjutsu, his skills, and his other abilities are overall a lot more better. And he does pick up good habits when it comes to studying from Doctor Strange, since, you know, he is a world-renowned doctor after all, and he would know a thing or two about studying. So he would help Naruto in that regard, so Naruto does do a lot better when it comes to his grades. Now Naruto would still be on Team 7 with Sakura and Sasuke, and their relationship would be a lot different. Naruto, with help of Doctor Strange, would have gotten over his crush of Sakura, so he's not annoying her all the time, so the two of them are able to have a better relationship, and Naruto is able to stand up for himself when it comes to Sasuke, begrudgingly earning his respect. They would go on to have the bell test, and they would perform a lot better thanks to Naruto helping, and with Sasuke and Sakura for the assistance, they would be able to work together to be able to get the bells. Now, this actually has a trickle-down effect on a lot of the characters. Sasuke is interested in Naruto and trying to learn what his power is. Kakashi suspects something about Naruto as well with his magic, because his Sharingan can't pick it up as easily as he can with chakra. And Sakura actually gets tutelage from Naruto learning a little bit of the mystic arts, because she realizes that she too would want to learn how to improve in her own skills and become a much better shinobi, seeing how she could have done a lot better. So that's a bit of the trickle-down effect that we see going into the story. Now, the first major change comes in the Land of Waves. In the Land of Waves, Naruto performs a lot better with the team, and all in all, the Land of Waves actually goes by a lot more smoother. Now, in this story, I made Haku a girl. She is a full-on female in this version of the story. You could say it's a bit of a swap, kind of like how I did with What If Sasuke Was a Girl. And my reason for making Haku a girl, I think you should know, is pretty obvious going forward. But also, it's because Haku is a pretty interesting character to me. And I think that in this scenario, she would have a unique set of powers that I think could be explored more if you give her a chance to train and develop instead of killing her off early. So I ended up allowing for Haku and Zabuza to survive in these events of the story, since Naruto uses his abilities to help save them. In this line of events, Naruto did receive a sling ring, just like the one that Doctor Strange uses. However, instead of it being gold, it's a silver ring. Now, the reason why Naruto's ring is silver is because the golden sling ring allows someone to travel across dimensions. And Doctor Strange didn't want Naruto to accidentally get lost in another dimension or something like that. So his sling ring is made primarily to be used in the Naruto world. So basically, his ring will allow him to travel anywhere in the Naruto world that's connected only to the Naruto world, but not allowing him to go anywhere else. So Naruto is able to use the sling ring to that degree, and it's effective for traveling, and he does use it to create a portal before Kakashi can cut through both Zabuza and Haku, saving their lives in the process. As thanks, Naruto asks for them to return with him to the Hidden Leaf Village, and this would be a way for them to get a chance to start over and have a better life. So Zabuza and Haku would end up going with Team 7 back to Konoha, where they would become registered and would go through their own trial period so that they could eventually become shinobi of the village hidden in the leaves. We would then go into the events of the Chunin exams, which remain the same for the most part, except again Naruto being a lot smarter, being a bit more wiser, performs a lot better in the Chunin exams with everyone with him, and vice versa. Within the events of the Chunin exams and the Forest of Death, Naruto and his team would do a lot better than they did in the original. Naruto even putting up a greater fight against Orochimaru than he does in the original timeline. Although in the end, he is still able to be subdued and Sasuke is still given the curse mark. Now, going into the Chunin exams, the matchups were randomized, so you'll have to go through and watch that for yourself to see how it turned out. Although in this scenario, all 3 members of Team 7 make it to the finals, and they would all have their own training arcs going into it. Sasuke training with Kakashi, while Naruto would begin his training with Jiraiya like before, Jiraiya getting a chance to see what Naruto could do with magic. But for Sakura, this is where another major change begins. Sakura, by recommendation of Kakashi, would train with Kurenai, since the two of them would have a knack for genjutsu. However, this is where Sakura would meet a pivotal character in her development in this story. That character would be none other than Agatha Harkness, or in this story, she is referred to as Agatha Yue of the Yue clan. Now, you might be wondering why Agatha is in this story. Is this the Agatha Harkness that you see in Scarlet Witch and Vision, or I think WandaVision, the Marvel show on Disney+? Well, this is actually a variant of Agatha. Unlike the one from the WandaVision show that's more of an antagonist, this Agatha Harkness is a much more older wizard in the form of the mystic arts, and this Agatha actually takes after the one from the comics, which was a protagonist and was actually a sort of hero. She actually worked with the Avengers and with the Fantastic Four, serving as a babysitter for Franklin Richards for the Fantastic Four, helping him to develop his powers. So this version of Agatha is actually a good version, but she's actually a variant. And the reason why she is in the Naruto world is that in her universe, it actually got destroyed by the Scarlet Witch and everything was basically brought to ruin. So she basically traveled to another dimension for her own safety, and she wound up in a version of the Naruto world. Here she married into the UA clan and ended up becoming the grandmother for Kurenai. And it's because of her mystic abilities, that's the reason why Kurenai is, even for a standard shinobi, really good at genjutsu. That's her mystic roots. Even though Kurenai didn't learn this herself until Agatha actually explained it to her. Even still, Sakura ends up working with them, developing her own mystic arts, and as she does so, we then see that Sakura actually develops her own version of chaos magic, which is the type of magic that Scarlet Witch uses that you see in the Marvel movies and in the WandaVision show. Although it's not as powerful and unstable as Wanda's is, it's still a powerful version nonetheless that Sakura uses to her own effect in combination with her genjutsu, making her illusion magic and genjutsu a lot more deadlier. From here, we would go into the events of the Chunin exams, where all 3 members of Team 7 end up performing and doing a pretty good job going into the finals. We would still have Konoha Crush, and that plays out relatively the same for the most part, except now you would have all 3 members of Team 7 working together as well. Also, during the events of Konoha Crush, we see Zabuza being given the rank of Jonin in the Hidden Leaf Village, although he would still be on probation. And he helps out in the fight against the Sound and Sand Village. And Haku would also be given the rank of Chunin in this timeline, and she actually goes on to help Naruto and the others in their fight against Gaara, eventually being able to defeat him and help save the village, although the 3rd Hokage does still die in the process. Following this, you would still have the search for Tsunade arc, as well as the return of Itachi and Kisame to the Hidden Leaf Village when they go after Naruto. For the most part, everything here still plays out the same, relatively speaking, not that much changes, although the fight between Naruto and Tsunade would be a bit different, as Naruto is actually able to catch Tsunade off guard and impress her. Also, because of Naruto's training and his better chakra control, he's actually able to learn how to do the Rasengan the right way without the need for using clones. Also, as a side note, because of his training with Dr. Strange, Naruto's clones are magical clones. They're solid, but they're magical clones, and they're not shadow clones. They're the type of clones that you see Dr. Strange using during the events of Infinity War against Thanos. But for the most part, from there, everything else remains the same, going into the events of the Sasuke retrieval arc, although that arc in and of itself is a bit different, mainly because in this arc we see a few things change. For one, Sakura actually stands up to Sasuke a bit more, and they actually have a bit of a fight before Sasuke leaves. And Sakura puts up a decent match against Sasuke, forcing him to have to use the Sharingan in an attempt to take her seriously and knock her out. So that's something else that happens when Sasuke leaves. Also, the team that goes after Sasuke is a bit different as well. Since Rock Lee is not injured in this timeline, he accompanies the team, and Hinata ends up joining the team as well, along with Haku that goes in for the assistance. So now this 8-man team ends up confronting with the Sound 5 at various points, similar to how they did in the original, although with more powerful shinobi to back up and help them. This actually leads to them being able to do a lot better, although Hinata is injured against Kidomaru, the bone manipulating shinobi, when Sasuke is eventually freed from the coffin and runs off and Naruto chases after him. And it's actually because of this event that it inspires Haku to want to learn how to use medical ninjutsu, as she was only able to do but so much to help heal Hinata, and the situation could have been a lot worse if the medical team hadn't gotten there sooner. Eventually, this does lead to the Valley of the End, where Naruto and Sasuke do have their final battle, although since Naruto is a lot more stronger in this version of events, Naruto actually wins and comes out on top, and ends up bringing Sasuke back to the Hidden Leaf Village, where Sasuke agrees to work with Naruto instead of running away, and this is where we would go into the time skip. Now, as we would go into the time skip, a few things would end up changing. For one, just before the time skip begins, Wong would actually arrive to the Naruto universe to check on Naruto and see if he's alright. And the reason why Wong arrived is because after the events of Infinity War, with half of life in all of the universes being erased, Wong was worried for Naruto's safety and if the same thing happened here, but he would be safe to say and learn that the events didn't happen. Now, some of you did suggest that the snap should have affected the Naruto universe, but actually that can't happen, and Marvel has actually stated a reason why that can't happen. You see, in every Marvel universe, there is a set of Infinity Stones, and those Infinity Stones can only work in the universe that they come from. So basically, Thanos using the gauntlet could only affect the universe that he was in. If Thanos tried to take the stones to another dimension, then it wouldn't work. Now, you might be saying, didn't that not happen in Endgame? Well, the reason why that works in Endgame is because they were going to different timelines where the time stones were, but that was still in the same universe. They didn't go to a different multiverse altogether. That was still the same multiverse. They were just hopping on the timelines of the different multiverse. So that still remains intact. But still though, Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet, the snap, it can't affect other dimensions, so Naruto's was safe. But because Wong arrived at that point in time, Naruto does learn what happened to Doctor Strange and the other half of the Marvel heroes, and he is saddened by the loss of his sensei, so Jiraiya comforts him there. Now, going into the time skip, Tsunade would ask Wong if for 2.5 years could he take Jiraiya and Naruto to his dimension and allow them to train under him for the time until the Akatsuki would make their next move. And Wong, seeing this as a way to honor his friend's memory and from his relationship with Naruto, he would agree to do so. So Naruto and Jiraiya would go and train with Wong for the 2.5 year time skip. As for Sasuke, following the events of the Sasuke retrieval arc, Sasuke would apologize to the other members of the Konoha 12, since a few of them did get hurt and almost died, putting their life on the lines to bring him back home. And most notably, we see a relationship start to form between Sasuke and Hinata. The reason being is that Sasuke ends up learning that Hinata was in a critical situation while in the hospital because she had almost died fighting against Kimimaro, and because of that event. So Sasuke basically ends up seeing that his actions do have consequences that affect not only himself but other people around him. So this makes him apologize to Hinata and take an interest in her in that kind of way. And we see here that in this version of events, Hinata actually starts to open up to the idea of moving on from Naruto. Not that she doesn't like him, but she understands that Naruto, you know, people can tell that he's kind of starting to develop feelings for Haku after everything they've been through and stuff like that. So she's thinking about moving on, and so you see how something could form between those two. And as for Sakura, if you're wondering who she could potentially be with, we decided to just give Rock Lee a chance here. Rock Lee was a nice boy. Sakura is starting to grow up and mature and see people for more than just their looks. Then that leaves her to giving Rock Lee a chance. So we see something potentially forming between them going into the time skip. But anyway, we're going to briefly break down how strong the characters got during the time skip. And we're going to be breaking down Naruto, Sakura, Sasuke, and Haku. You may be asking, what was Haku doing during the time skip? Well, actually, she was training under Lady Tsunade because, again, following the events with the Sasuke retrieval arc and not being able to help heal Hinata the right way or do more for her than what she could have done, she never wants to be in that situation again. So that's why she would want to train in medical ninjutsu. And seeing how Lady Tsunade was world renowned for her medical ninjutsu, she asked to train under the Hokage. And Tsunade, seeing that Haku is a ice release user, a rare Kekkei Genkai for the Hidden Leaf Village, she could see that this could be a major asset for the village to have her train under her. So that's where her training arc would begin. But anyway, we're going to start first with the training arcs for Naruto and Jiraiya. For Naruto and Jiraiya, they would be training under Wong during the 2.5-year time skip. While they would be training in the Sanctum Sanctorum under Wong, Jiraiya would get a chance to learn about Eldrick's magic, which was the kind of magic that Doctor Strange and Wong used in the MCU. Naruto would basically act as Jiraiya's sort of sensei in that regard, helping him get the ropes of learning magic, and while Jiraiya would be able to get the hang of it, in the end, Naruto is simply going to have the better affinity for it since he's a lot younger, he has a lot more room to grow, while Jiraiya is a bit more old and seasoned and would have to try to rework his brain on how he views chakra and magic as a whole. Now for Naruto, he would improve much more in his chakra control than he already had, so using his skills would be a lot more refined. He will also learn how to use the Nine Tails chakra, mastering it up to the Three Tails, and he was able to use that power to an even greater degree. You see, because they're in a safer environment to allow Naruto to test out the power of the Nine Tails, he would be able to use that power without worrying of hurting anyone, since Wong would be there for the assistance. Anytime Naruto snaps and goes out of control, Wong can easily get him back into place. Now, first, we would have to look at what Naruto already knows. In terms of spells, he would know the images/illusions of Icon. These are basically what you could say are the magical version of clones. The images of Icon are solid clones, while the illusions of Icon are basically like regular clones. Not physical clones, but just your standard clones. Then next, you would have the Shield of Seraphim. He would have Eldrick's magic manipulation, basically the different type of mystical constructs that you see Doctor Strange use in the MCU. You would have the Vapors of Valtor, which are essentially just creating a thick mist that's hard to see through, kind of like the Hidden Mist Jutsu. You would have the Chains of Kraken, which, when you think about it, for Naruto being of Uzumaki descent, the Uzumaki chakra chains, this essentially makes this spell a lot easier for Naruto to use, as it's unconsciously a combination of both magic and chakra, as it brings out the chains that Naruto can use. And then you would have astral projection, which would allow Naruto to leave his body and project himself in the non-physical realm, so you have that to work for him as well. And in terms of jutsu, Naruto would have the Rasengan as well as the Shadow Shuriken clone jutsu under his belt. Although he would have the standard, regular clone jutsus like the substitution and the transformation also. Now, when it comes to anything new that Naruto would learn, there's not really all that much that I can give him. And the reason why I'm saying this is because when you think about it, when it comes to magic in general, magic is a very broad sort of like type of power. I mean, essentially, I could give Naruto any type of mystic power that could let him do almost everything, but that really wouldn't add to the story. So I wanted to think of techniques that would work to Naruto's advantage. On top of improving in his taijutsu and all of the techniques he already has, the one spell that I thought I could add to his arsenal are the Flames of Faltine. And these are basically mystic flames that Naruto can summon. These aren't required for chakra or anything of that nature. It's sort of a natural type of flame, and I think this would work with Naruto's wind style. And I think that Naruto in this scenario would discover his affinity for wind chakra, so Jiraiya would step in and help him out in learning wind ninjutsu. And basically for Naruto, he's trying to get a balance between using magic and using ninjutsu. Basically learning how to combine the two, how to add them together and create great combinations of the two powers. So in terms of ninjutsu, he would learn the wind style air bullet, the wind style wind dragon jutsu, and on top of him having the Rasengan, he would learn the ultra Rasengan as well. When it comes to Jiraiya, he would improve in his overall strength, speed, and stamina. He would improve in his taijutsu and his martial arts. I do think that in this scenario, Wong would want to study with Jiraiya to learn more about chakra and how ninjutsu works, and Jiraiya would explain various things to him. And under the scenario, Jiraiya would learn how to perfect his Sage mode. so he won't have to use Monpato when he goes into Sage mode, but instead in this scenario, Jiraiya would be a perfect Sage. Jiraiya would continue to learn the mystic arts with Naruto and get the hang of things, although he wouldn't learn as many spells as Naruto does. I believe he would pick through and find the spells that were best suited for him and his combat style to combine with his ninjutsu and with his senjutsu as well. And for him, the spells that I have given Jiraiya would be the Winds of Watum, the Flames of Faltane, the Bolts of Balthak, the Crimson Bands of Sidorak, the Shield of Seraphim, and he would learn how to use astral projection. Since Jiraiya does work as a spy and goes to gather information, a technique like astral projection would definitely come in handy. So you get to see how a play on magic would be for both Naruto and Jiraiya, as they would want to try to have a balance and a combination of their two various techniques. Then next we would have Sasuke Uchiha, who would spend his 2.5-year time skip training with both Kakashi and with Loki in secret. With Kakashi, it's basically what you would imagine he would learn. He would get a mastery over the 3 Tomoe Sharingan, and he would do dojutsu training not only with Kakashi, but since he would be building a relationship with Hinata, he would train with her as well, helping her to improve, and we would get to see a bit of an exchange, not only with Hinata but with Neji as well, and a bit of a clash between both the Sharingan and the Byakugan. Also, in terms of Sharingan, he would learn more about Sharingan Genjutsu, and for that, he would actually train with Sakura in terms of his Genjutsu, as she would be becoming more and more of a Genjutsu prodigy. And then he would also learn Kenjutsu, or the Way of the Sword, under Kakashi as well, and we would see him carrying a sword of his own. Now, in terms of ninjutsu, he has a plethora that he will add to his arsenal, but these are the primary ones that I feel would be most suited for Sasuke. First, you would have the lightning style lightning blade jutsu. I think that he will eventually evolve the Chidori and would go on to just learn the lightning blade, since it's a lot more deadlier and a lot less chakra draining than the Chidori. Also, he would have lightning style overdrive level 3. Overdrive is essentially an offshoot version of the lightning cloak. It's similar and works in a lot of ways to the lightning cloak that you see the 3rd and 4th Raikage use, although overdrive isn't to the same potent effect. You could say it's like the B-level version of the lightning cloak, but since the lightning cloak is exclusive to the Cloud Village, there isn't a way for Sasuke to learn it. But the overdrive is a much more commonly known technique, and it's one that Sasuke would have in his arsenal. He does use this in the part 1 of this story, going to levels 1 and 2, but by the events of the time skip, he would have overdrive level 3. And essentially overdrive, like the lightning cloak, it increases your overall strength, speed, your perception, time, and everything else. So it's basically sort of a power-up for Sasuke. There would also be the lightning style lightning clone jutsu. Since Naruto would have his own version of clones, I think that Sasuke, in order to keep up, would use lightning clones in this regard, since he has an affinity for lightning. Then you would also have, in terms of fire style, you would have the Great Fireball Jutsu, and you would have the Fire Dragon Jutsu, 2 jutsus of the Uchiha clan that Sasuke would definitely add, along with his regular Fireball Jutsu and the Phoenix Flower Fireball Jutsu. In terms of Earth style, I think that he would inherit the Headhunter Jutsu that he would learn from Kakashi, that Kakashi used during their first battle in the Bell Test, and I think he would have Earth style Mud Wall, since that's a commonly known Earth style technique. I do think he would gain a summoning technique as well, and this would be for Ninja Hounds. Since he's not training with Orochimaru, he would not make a contract to summon snakes. Also, in terms of personal ninjutsu, I think Sasuke is still skilled enough where he will learn how to create the Kirin Jutsu. Even though it might not be as strong as the original, it will still be deadly and effective none the same. Now, when it comes to Loki, their training would be done in the shadows. Now, you might be wondering, why is Loki training Sasuke in this timeline? Well, you see, this version of Loki, if you've seen from the Loki series, is working for the TVA, and you have the events of the multiverse collapsing. And because Loki has to put together a team that can go after the one responsible for the multiverse collapsing in a sense, he needs to have warriors that are trained and ready to fight. And after taking a look in this universe and seeing Doctor Strange and how he's already been involved with training Naruto and how there's a version of Agatha training Sakura, he decides to take Sasuke under his wing. Now, because Loki's mission takes him all throughout the multiverse and to different points in time, he can essentially afford to take 2 years off to train Sasuke here, simply because where he goes, it's not just about where he goes, it's also about when he goes. So he has to travel to different points in time anyway, and since he's using this time to lay low, he's taking an interest in the Uchiha. Having seen how his fate could potentially turn out, he wants to try to change that as well. So not only does Loki train Sasuke in terms of mystic arts and things of that nature, but he also gives him life lessons in a way, vaguely speaking about his own connection with his brother Thor and the complications of a brotherly bond. And these are things that Sasuke will affect him in a certain way. Now, when it comes to Loki and using Asgardian / Frost Giant magic, Loki, in his type of magic, he does not require books or the use of magical sources, nor does he have to recite incantations, spells, or use runes to trigger his mystical abilities. Essentially, it's one of those things where Sasuke would have to watch him with the Sharingan and try to understand how he uses it. Now, because of this, Sasuke's Sharingan would develop into something a lot different. He would have the ability for a Sharingan to switch from blue to red. Red Sharingan allows him to read chakra. Blue Sharingan basically allows Sasuke to read magic and basically learn how to use spells and different forms of magic without the need for saying the incantations or things of that nature. Now, under Loki, even though he won't learn a lot of destructive techniques, there will be skillful techniques that he can add to his arsenal. For one, like Loki, he'll be able to use astral projection. He'll be able to have illusion casting that can be both solid and fake. He would have present concealment or invisibility, which would erase Sasuke's presence, making it hard for even tracker ninja of the elite to be able to track him, simply because he would be using magic instead of chakra. He would also have telekinesis, and by focusing his mind, he can use this to great effect. Even when using the Shuriken Jutsu, Sasuke can bend and move Shuriken that might fall off target, or he can throw them off target to lure his enemy into a false sense of security, only to use his telekinesis to bring it back. And on an even greater scale, Sasuke could use this on ninjutsu. For example, he could launch a fireball jutsu straight into the air, make the enemy think that he missed, but then use his telekinesis to take the fireball and drag it right back down on the enemy when they don't see it coming. Also, like Loki, he would learn how to use teleportation, although teleportation magic can be effective depending on how strong the user is. Because of Loki and his overall strength as a whole, he doesn't teleport very far, like not across countries or things of that nature. But if he's fighting within, say, 100 feet or a few miles or so, then Loki could teleport from place to place in terms of that regard. So Sasuke could have teleportation in his arsenal as well. Then finally, Sasuke would have mystic constructs, which are similar to the ones that Naruto used and the one that Sakura uses, although the color of his constructs would be a deep dark blue, as opposed to Naruto's bright orange or Sakura's scarlet red. So that would be the difference for Sasuke in terms of his abilities. Then next up, we would have Sakura Haruno and her training under Agatha Yue and Kurenai Yue. With Sakura, she would learn how to channel and control her chaos magic, a lot similar to how we see Scarlet Witch using hers. Now, it's not going to be on the ridiculous level of her being able to warp reality or affect things on a multiversal level, but you could say that her level of skill and power would be on par with what we see the Scarlet Witch using during the events of Age of Ultron. And if we have to say what her max could potentially be, think of what Scarlet Witch was able to do to Thanos during the events of Avengers Endgame. So you can basically see where she has to grow and improve. She would have the ability to manipulate the elements naturally. Kind of similar to how you see the Avatar use his powers from Avatar The Last Airbender. So she's basically able to do that without the need for manipulating chakra. Finally, we would see her primary use be in her Genjutsu abilities. Her Genjutsu combined with her Chaos Magic would make the damage that she does in the Genjutsu realm to an even greater effect than most average Genjutsu. We could say that Sakura would be someone who would be a non-Uchiha, whose Genjutsu would be on par with some of the best that we've seen in this series. Thus, the reason why she trains with Sasuke in helping him in developing his Genjutsu skills, being able to match with him even when he's using his Sharingan. In terms of her mystic constructs, she would have this ability similar to both Naruto and Sasuke, although hers would be a glowing color of crimson, unlike theirs that would be of different colors akin to their own natural abilities. She would also have the ability to use Chaos Alchemy, which you could say is something similar to that of the alchemy that you see Edward Elric use in Full Metal Alchemist, so she would have that under her belt also. Finally, in terms of ninjutsu, this is where she would get help from others such as Kakashi, Sasuke, Zabuza, and even Haku. Since one of her primary elements is water, I think that water style jutsu would be something that would be up her alley. And the 4 water techniques that I think she would use to great effect would be the water clone jutsu, the water shield jutsu, the hidden mist jutsu, as well as the water bullet jutsu. Then finally, we would come to Haku in her training under Lady Tsunade. Under the 5th Hokage, Haku would learn the abilities in medical ninjutsu, as well as gaining her own Byakugo seal, or the strength of 100 seals. Her chakra control would be exponentially go to a higher rate than it was before. You have to remember that even before in the early events of Naruto, Haku had a pretty good sense of perception as well as accuracy when it came to using her Senbon during combat, seeing as how Haku was able to target a lot of the non-vital areas with a thin metal needle. So you would have to think that under Lady Tsunade, her skills with the scalpel as well as her skills with the Senbon would be even deadlier than they were before. She would also gain the ability and form the contract with Katsuya, the summoning slug, that would be used by Tsunade also. In terms of her techniques, she would have perfect precision when it came to fighting, using her Senbon in an even more deadlier way than in the original timeline, giving her much more perfect aim and allowing her to attack the best parts of the body, meaning that her attacks could do a lot of damage, ranging from incapacitating to paralyzation to even outright assassination, earning her the title of the Ice Princess of Konoha. Her skills would be so renowned that from time to time she would actually work with the Anbu Black Ops whenever there was assassination that needs to be carried out, because her skills would just be that deadly. I would say that among Konoha's best, Haku could potentially go down as the greatest assassin that the Hidden Leaf has ever seen. Also, her ninjutsu would increase as well, changing the more she increased her abilities. A few list of them would include her standard Crystal Ice Mirrors technique, the Kekkei Genkai from her clan. There would also be another technique that she would add to her arsenal, and I would call this Ice Style Crystallization. This can only be done partially, but I do think as time goes on, she would learn how to use this to full effect. Now you might be wondering, what is crystallization? If you're familiar with Iceman from Marvel Comics, and you know how Iceman is basically able to turn his whole body into ice, that's basically the kind of principle that you would use with Haku. Essentially, she would be able to turn her whole body into ice, and basically have a ice-like state similar to Iceman. The reason why this is partial is because she can only do this at partial parts of her body, mainly being her arms and legs, but she is still working on the ability to be able to do it for her entire body. Essentially, Haku could have the potential to turn into Iceman or Ice Woman, so to speak, in this story. Next, you have Ice Style Wolf Fang Avalanche, and this is a Ice Style technique where the user would create two large wolves made entirely out of ice that sink and devour their target, ripping them apart until there's nothing left. You could say it's something akin to, say, the Kirin technique that Sasuke uses, the lightning dragon itself, but this is for wolves made entirely out of ice. Then next you would have the standard clone jutsu, which would be in her arsenal, and this would be the ice clone jutsu, which I do think would be unique for her, seeing as how she is one of the only few characters in the Naruto universe that currently has ice release. Then you would have Ice Style Thousand Needle Jutsu. This technique is done when Haku splashes water high above her target into the air, and the water transforms into water Senbon. She then transforms the water Senbon into ice, so basically 1,000 ice-like needles basically fall from the sky and attack multiple targets at once. When combined with her summoning technique, she can actually take this to an even deadlier level, and this is a technique that I would call Ice Style Acid Ice Needle Jutsu. Basically taking the liquid acid from Katsuya the summoning slug, she would turn the acid into ice needles and would have them stab into her target. So not only does the target get stabbed with Senbon made out of ice, but that ice is actually acid, which ends up melting inside of the target, doing much more damage than just the ice needles by themselves, making them an even greater threat. Also, in homage to her sensei Zabuza, she would also have the water style Hidden Mist Jutsu under her belt as well, being able to cover and blanket her enemies within a thick mist, making it hard to see where her attacks are coming from, and when combined with using Senbon and smaller other weapons and projectiles in her arsenal, this would make Haku a much more deadlier shinobi than most, truly living up to the title of her being the Ice Princess. But anyway, with that out of the way, we can now get into the prologue of the story. The events would begin following the 2.5-year time skip, as now both Jiraiya and Naruto would be preparing to leave. They would be thanking Wong for his assistance, for training them and for watching over them these last 2.5 years, giving them a safe place to be able to work and train together. Wong would be feeling a bit sad now, looking as how Naruto, someone whom he had come to see as a close nephew, and Jiraiya as a kindred friend and soul, would now be leaving back to their own world. And as for Wong, he would have to focus now all of his attention on helping the dwindling sorcery population regrow back to what they once were, seeing as how the world was still reeling from the devastation that was the snap that had only taken place 2.5 years prior. However, before leaving, he would have a gift for the both of them. For Naruto, he would make for him a ninja vest, similar to the ones that he had seen worn by those from his world. Its color would be orange, similar to his pants. However, this vest had a unique property. Also for Jiraiya, he would make for him another red cloak, similar to the one that he wore. What was unique about these two pieces of clothing was that they were made from the same cloth that was used with the Cloak of Levitation, meaning that when they wore these items of clothing, they would be able to levitate as well, giving them the ability of flight to a certain degree. They would take their gifts and they would thank Wong once again for everything that he had done for them. Wong would warn that, despite everything, they were probably going to be in a situation where they wouldn't talk with one another for a while, as there was still so much that he needed to do, and it was probably pushing it to the limits for them to have the type of interactions that they were having. Before leaving though, Jiraiya would be given one more gift. It would be a small box, and inside there would be a silver sling ring, similar to the one that Naruto had. It was made and set so that it could be used in Naruto's own universe, although it wouldn't allow them access back to his universe, and the only way they would see each other was if Wong had come to see them. Although, knowing of other unseen potential threats that could come into the world, this was done as a safety precaution, as to not drag any unnecessary trouble in between dimensions. Naruto would bow to Wong one last time, wishing him good luck in his future and hoping that the two of them would meet someday. Jiraiya would thank Wong as well, as a portal would open and the two of them would return back to Konoha. At this point in time, there would still be 3 years until the events of Endgame. In the meantime, as Naruto and Jiraiya would arrive back to the village hidden in the leaves, before going to the Hokage Tower, Naruto would go to a clothing store, as he needed some new clothes after pretty much destroying the ones he already had. For Naruto's clothes, they would be very similar to the ones that he had in the original timeline, in terms of him having the black sandals as well as the orange pants. However, instead of the trademark jacket that he had originally, he would instead wear a long black sleeve t-shirt with his orange vest on top of it. He would still have the red spiral patterns on both of his shoulders, but this gave him a bit of a different look and a different feel altogether, as well as having the headband cloth replaced from its dark blue to that of an all black as well, while Jiraiya would go with the standard clothing that he normally wore anyway. From there, the two of them would arrive to the Hokage's tower, having a chance to meet with Lady Tsunade, and for Naruto, he would have a joyous occasion as he would see Haku again, seeing how much she had changed as well. The outfit that she's wearing will be on the screen at this point in time, in case you're wondering what Haku would be wearing during this point in the story. Haku would be overjoyed and happy to see Naruto, as she would rush over and give him a hug immediately. Naruto would hug her close, and the two of them would be in their embrace for a while, until Naruto could sense a dark, menacing aura coming from behind him. He would dodge at the last second as a sword almost took his head off. Naruto would yell at who would be trying to lop his head off so soon after arriving, but then he would be feeling fear as he realized the man that tried to take his head off was none other than Zabuza. Haku would give Zabuza a deep look, as she knew that her surrogate father could often be overprotecting of her in a way. And while Zabuza was kinder to Naruto, it still didn't sit with him all too well how Naruto could just get so friendly with Haku all the time, especially in his presence. There would be laughter in the room as well, as Konohamaru, as well as his friends Moegi and Udon would be laughing from a distance, until Zabuza would yell at them to cut it out. Naruto would be filled with many questions, wondering why they were here, and just what was going on. Well, first and foremost, to explain the meaning of Konohamaru and his team, this was actually the team that Zabuza was leading. After his probation was over and for all the work that he had done for the Hidden Leaf, Tsunade thought that it was appropriate for him to build bonds with that of the village itself, and as such, she made him the captain of his own beginning team. That would be Team Konohamaru. However, because Zabuza was still a former shinobi of the Hidden Mist, certain precautions had to be taken whenever he traveled outside of the Hidden Leaf Village. For one, he was always required to wear an Anbu mask, and he would always go by a code name. On top of that, he would have to keep the Executioner's blade stored away inside of a sealed scroll that he would carry on his side, and he would instead fight with a standard sword on his back, although he could use the Executioner's blade when he needed to, although he was warned to only use it in a worst case scenario, and even then he had to make sure that if he used it, then he needed to finish the job, as they didn't want word getting back to the Hidden Mist. As they would be speaking and continuing in conversation, before long, Kakashi would arrive as well, as he had actually gotten back to the village not too long ago. While Jiraiya was gone, Kakashi would spend his time training as well as carrying on in the spy network that Jiraiya had left behind. For Kakashi, this worked best seeing as how he only had to train Sasuke, and Sasuke, since he moved up the ranks rather quickly, was able to become Jonin not too long after, while Sakura was able to make the rank of Chunin. As they walked in, Naruto would see how his teammates had changed as well. Sasuke wore a Jonin uniform a lot similar to the one Kakashi wore, albeit he had the symbols for the Uchiha on both of his shoulders also. As for Sakura, her uniform would be a lot similar to the one that you see in Naruto Shippuden in the beginning, although she would be wearing her Jonin vest on top of the red top that she already wore, Also, her pink hair had gotten even longer than the last time that Naruto had seen her. Team 7 would be happy to be reunited once again, and they would enjoy their reunion as well. For Jiraiya, he had finally been able to bring back his novel that had been long awaited. You see, while Naruto and Jiraiya were in the other world with Wong training, they would from time to time go out and check out the scenes. For both Naruto and Jiraiya, they learned many different fascinations of the new world, seeing different forms of technology that they didn't have yet in the world that they came from. Now, they weren't primitive. They did have certain types of technology, like TVs and movies, but they were limited. They weren't anything like the advancements they saw in the world that Wong lived in. But for Jiraiya, there was something else that he learned that was even to much more greater effect than anyone could have ever possibly hoped to dream. Basically, by chance, Jiraiya learned about the internet. And he learned about certain sites on the internet. Certain sites that should only be seen by those who are 18 plus and older. And learning about those sites, Jiraiya spent many a days looking through those sites and all the joys that they gave him. Not only did he write the next volume for Make Out Paradise, but he was able to come up with 4 more sequels that were all ready to be published. And he had the first editions, all 4 of them already set for Kakashi to personally read. Kakashi now had something that he could definitely look forward to in the meantime. As for Sasuke, not too long ago, his training with Master Loki was coming to an end. Loki was actually preparing to leave as he had other work that he needed to do, but he was going to come back to this timeline eventually. That is, when everything was all said and done. Interfering with this timeline any more than he already had could potentially have negative effects. But before leaving, Loki would tell Sasuke of the promises that he had made for him. To tell him to always remember to stay true to himself, and to always remember that there was more to life than just him. Sasuke would take these lessons to heart, and before leaving, Loki would give one last parting gift. He would help by using his own mystic arts, and would remove the curse mark that was placed upon him. In doing so, Sasuke was now able to feel more free and liberated. He couldn't have been any more grateful to Loki and everything that he had done for him. Although, when he turned to look, Loki was gone. Using his teleportation device, Loki set out to build his team, which wasn't going to be easy. There were plenty of worlds that he needed to go and see for himself. There was a world where a boy had the ability to turn into some flaming skull demon. There was some swordsman boy that had this black type symbiote to use at his disposal. And there was another boy in a world full of superheroes, a lot similar to that Stark that he fought all that while ago. Although there was no Stark in his universe. Although his story was just getting started for the most part. So instead, he focused his attentions on the first warrior he was going to go and recruit. He was some boy from a world a lot similar to his own. Apparently, he had gotten sent to this world by some chance, and now he chose to live there as their hero. He had the ability to use magic, but he also had another primary ability. The abilities of a certain bug, an arachnid, the spider. As Loki set his sights, the device would take him to a country that he had never heard of before. A land called Lagunica. In the meantime, as everyone gathered together, they would go out for a chance to eat and to catch up. In the meantime, Jiraiya would get the full report from Kakashi about everything that had happened while he was gone, and Jiraiya would speak with Tsunade as they had a lot of catching up to do also. While they were going out, Naruto would catch up with a lot of his friends one by one, meeting with Hinata, who was not only happy to see him, but was happy to see Sasuke once again as well, since Sasuke had gotten back from a mission not too long ago. He would also see Choji and Ino and Tenten and Neji and Lee, although they were going to be going off on their own mission and they were actually leaving while they were coming back. And then finally, he would see Shikamaru and Temari while they were walking around together, getting the events ready for the next Chunin exams that were still up and coming. However, in the meantime, off far away in the village hidden in the sand, the Kazekage, Gaara, would find his village under attack under the cover of night, as two men dressed in black robes with red clouds would begin their descent. These two beings, rogue shinobi and members of the terrorist organization the Akatsuki, Deidara of the Stone, and Sasori of the Red Sand, former shinobi of the very village he was attacking. They would begin their conquest fighting against the Kazekage, who, although he put up a great stand and defended his village ultimately from great danger, would sadly end up paying the price, as he was gravely wounded and taken away by the Akatsuki duo. In the midst of their assault, word would be sent back to the Hidden Leaf at once. Before long, as the message would return to the Hidden Leaf village, Tsunade would summon Naruto to her office. Along with him would be Sakura, Sasuke, and Haku, as well as Temari, who had been called in and was devastated upon hearing the news of what had happened to her home, as well as the fate of her brothers, and one who had been taken by the Akatsuki. Catching the attention of Naruto, as he too wanted his chance against the Akatsuki, but even more so to save his dearest friend. And for Sasuke, the Akatsuki were definitely something on his radar, as his brother was a member of the Akatsuki, and this could potentially lead to a chance encounter with his older kin once again. The mission was going to be hasty, and there wasn't any time to put a better team together. This was essentially going to be Team 7's first mission back together in over 2.5 years. Their mission? To escort Temari back to the Sand Village and aid them in the rescue of Gaara, the Kazekage. With no time to lose, Team 7, now accompanying with Haku, who was being sent out as well as the medic of the team, the five would make their way to the gate as they prepared themselves for the journey ahead. Everyone now looking to show what they had learned over the last 2.5 years. Their skills were going to be put to the test, and in a hurry. As the sun began to rise, and the team set out of the gate, Sasuke, Naruto, Sakura, and Haku, the four, were now united together as one once again, as their journey into the shinobi world was now underway before them. This concludes What If Naruto Was Trained by Dr. Strange? Naruto Mystic Adventures Shippuden Part 0, the Prologue. If you liked today's video and everything else that we have on the channel, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcastings that's to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video, as we are going to be getting the first part of What If Ben 10 Was in the MCU, Avengers 2012. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with Power Core Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.